Hey guys, what's up? I'm Joe, and this is the Bradford Shop. Hey guys, today we're here in Conway at our shop, and we're gonna do a deep dive into wood fencing, specifically how do you choose the right wood fence for your needs, your home, your business. So I understand there's a lot of options out there. Wood fencing, specifically wood privacy, is by far the most popular and most common style and type of fence that you'll see. It provides a lot of privacy. It's usually an economical choice, but how do you know what to choose from all the different options? So we're gonna dive into all the different options you have with a wood fence in particular, what you need to look out for, and how to ensure that you are getting the best needs and the best bang for your buck with your wood privacy fence. So with that, there are some benefits of wood. There's also limitations of wood. So you'll want to understand what those are. Wood, like I said, is a great option. It can be very economical. It can be long lasting, and it can provide a lot of value in privacy and that sort of thing. It's readily available. So there's a lot of great benefits about it. But there are limitations, one being the fact that it is a natural product, so it's got wood grain and is exposed to the elements, so even the best quality lumber, it has the potential of bowing and warping with sun, heat, cold, wet exposure. So do be leery of that. If anybody's guaranteeing like, hey, this won't warp, that's gotta be a red flag. Now, there can be some products that may be less likely to bow or warp, but it's never a guarantee. So you've got to understand that it's a natural product. It's never a guarantee that it's not going to move and shift because it is wood. So if those are main concerns, you may want to consider different options that are man-made or like a steel, vinyl. Anyway, that's another topic. The other thing is, with the current process of growing and harvesting the wood, back several decades ago, we would have had access to what they call old growth timber, which would be wood that was just naturally grown, slow grown trees. It's cut, milled, and made into building products, fence products, and that wood was superior because it was slowly grown, it was more dense, more strong. But the current state of the lumber market is most of what's available is going to be something that has been planted. It's been through a process to assist the tree to grow quicker, which is great for the timeliness of that, but it leads to a tree that's not as dense and has a little looser grain patterns and is going to contribute to the ultimate quality of that wood. That's not going to have quite the lifespan that the old growth timber used to be, but that's kind of across the board. Any lumber that you get right now is going to have gone through that process of a more quicker growth time frame. The typical structure or anatomy of a wood fence, specifically a wood privacy fence, would be your post, your rails, typically a horizontal rail like a 2x4, and then your pickets. So now we're going to dive into each one of those components, what your options are, and why we choose the products that we choose. So with your pickets, that's probably the biggest thing. And you want to keep all this in mind when you're comparing quotes or trying to plan a project for your own home of what is somebody pricing me. A privacy fence versus a privacy fence just kind of seems like one would be about the same as the other, but it does depend on what type of lumber they're using, what grade of pickets and all that they're using, that will ultimately contribute to the look of it and the longevity of it. So with our pickets, in our area in Central Arkansas, the two most common options are pine and cedar. There may be other parts of the country where cypress or spruce or different things are available, but pine and cedar are definitely the two most common options. So with the pine, we've got a few different options here. So pine's definitely the most popular style. If you drive around neighborhoods and see the 6-foot privacy fences, 95% of them in this area are going to be pine. But there is a difference. So not all pine pickets are created equal. And I'll kind of go through that. So this one here, so if you go to like a big box store, or some of our local lumber yards even, they will typically have a picket that looks like this. And this is most commonly is typically a imported picket. So it's being cut and milled somewhere else. A lot of times in South America, the problems with that, or the challenges that come with that, is it's cut and milled there, but then it's rapidly dried so that it can be put on a cargo container or ship in order to be shipped and to make weight. But it sucks all that moisture out real quick, which can cause variations in the shape of the picket. And then it's typically not treated until it gets to the States. So there's a lag there between being milled and treated. And so there's some variation there that can contribute to a lesser quality. You can see here, there's some pretty ragged, jagged edges on these. And in our experience, we've never really offered these as an option, but these tend to be the ones that you see warp the most. Again, any exterior wood has the potential to warp, but these imported pickets tend to be the ones that, man, do some crazy haywire stuff. So that's that you would typically find at like Lowe's or a local lumber yard is very common, that there. Next is specifically from Home Depot, which if I was a homeowner and I was doing a DIY project and I didn't have access to the other red pine pickets that we use, this is probably the option I would go with because it is a local picket, and so there's some quality, I guess, upgrade there compared to the import. But the things that we found with this have been the quality control on these. You can see this one actually looks pretty nice. It's got a kind of an odd cut for the dog ear up there. But like on some of these, we just pulled some random ones out of the stack at Home Depot, but you got some bark edge right there. Also found that they don't seem to be as true or straight on the edges as the red pine ones. And yeah, just some more variation that you get picket to picket in these. With that, if they're not as straight, you can see if you put them up against each other, then they can cause gapping and that sort of thing. That's unnecessary. So again, that's kind of middle of the road, but that's what you're going to find at Home Depot as far as a pine picket. And the other is the red pine picket, which these are milled in Michigan from the Great Lakes area. It is a specific red pine. What you get with the red pine is it's a little bit denser, a little stronger than the yellow pine, and the milling and the quality control on these we found to be excellent. They have very straight edges, and again, they can, in weather, any of these can move and bow, but for the starting point, these start out very, very straight. You can see, I mean, there's almost no gap there. Now, as we've talked in other videos, that will dry and gap some, but it's a good straight board. It's got a great grain patterns. And then the other thing is this is a full 6-inch picket. So you get a little bit more coverage for your picket as opposed to these that are gonna be a 5.5 inch. So with that, those are kind of gonna be your pine options that are readily available, at least in this area. You may find in your area there may be one or two other options. But yeah, so this red pine picket, like I said, comes from Michigan. it's something that you have to buy from a fence company or a specific fence distributor. It's not something you can run out on a Saturday from Lowe's or Home Depot and grab. So that's something you'll want to consider when planning your project and deciding which type of picket is right for you. So then, what you can see how that one lays is on these particular ones from Home Depot. We had these bark edges, but yeah, there's just a big inconsistency of like how the dog ear was cut, and then it's like thinner at the bottom than it is here, and then even the thicknesses are a little bit varying. These are all technically 5/8 pickets, but I've seen some of these Home Depot pickets, some be as small as like a 1/2 inch. You can see the nice little bow right there. And yeah, you can see as they're put together, like they're touching in certain spots and then gapped there. But even laying those, if you were putting those up on the fence, even like that one's a 1/4 inch higher than that one, and and that one's like thicker than these. So there's just some quality variations that again is in my book is better than the import picket, but are some challenges that you would have to consider or overcome if you are using this particular Home Depot pine picket. If you compare that to these red pine pickets that we use, you can see like those are totally flat on the table, and we just grabbed these out of a random pile outside, so there's nothing special about them. You can also see just how straight and true they are. Like you got a true 6 inches here and a true 6 inches here, and then they just sit nice and tight together. And yeah, they got good even dog ears. Yeah, just like I said, the quality that comes out of these mills is superb to others that I found, in addition to the qualities of the red pine being more dense and stronger than the yellow pine. It's hard to beat this if you're going with a pine option. Okay, so with our cedar pickets, what we have here are a few different variations of a Western red cedar, which that's very important. I don't have one here right now, but there is such thing as a Japanese cedar, which would be akin to the import pine picket. It is imported. It is a much drastically lower quality wood. It's called cedar, but man, I've seen some crazy things with that, some splintering and deterioration, and just I would strongly suggest staying away from Japanese cedar pickets. And just for caution or ammunition for you, if you're getting bids for a cedar fence and it just has a generic cedar privacy fence, I would ask for them to specify whether it was Western red cedar or Japanese cedar or some other species, because you just don't want them upselling you on a quote-unquote cedar fence and using something like a cheap Japanese cedar that more than likely, best case, you're not going to get a very good lifespan out of. Worst case, you're going to have issues with over the time of that fence. So anyway, something to look out for. But all three of these are a Western red cedar, which is typically what you would want to have. So these two are from Home Depot, and then these are what we typically use. Again, that you wouldn't be able to run out and get at a big box store. You're gonna have to get through a specific distributor or specific cedar lumber sales. But so with this, these are all pretty similar. These are not horrible that come from Home Depot, but there are some quality advantages or disadvantages. So this first one is just a generic red cedar picket that comes from Home Depot. You can see now there's going to be pickets in any pile, that even in our pickets that we've got to cull and throw out. But yeah, you can see there's some pretty bad marring and splintering on this one that we grabbed. I don't know if you can tell, there's This one's not super straight. It's kind of bowed up here. You can see there's some differences in the just the straightness of it. There's also some odd coloring. Again, so I say that with caution because even in the best cedar picket, you're gonna have some slight color variations, but this is pretty drastic with a real light color next to a really, really dark color. So the main thing on these is just the quality control. This is a Western red cedar, but as you can see, they accept some things that may be a little subpar to some of the other options. So that's one there. This one is another that it's a Western red cedar. It's from Alta, which is a reputable mill and brand of Western red cedar. That's also, Alta is who mills and sells the ones that we use. The difference with this one that you can get at Home Depot is the width of the board. This one is a 5.5 inch board as opposed to a 6. So it seems like not much, like, oh, it's a 1/2 inch, but over, few hundred feet of fence, that 1/2 inch adds up and contributes to less pickets, less nails that you actually have to install and maintain compared to the 5.5 inch board. Again, just some quality things. There's some nicked edges and stuff. You're gonna get that in any type, but yeah, if you can see here, we've got this butted up to this other one here, and then there's a huge gap right here. So just the straightness of these boards is a little different than what you might find in a higher grade Western red cedar. So it's something, if you're doing DIY or this is all you had access to, it's not a horrible option, but just know there are better ones out there. So that would go to this. You can see it's a pretty clean, again, just like some of those variations, you're gonna get some varying coloring and some varying knots. There will be knots in these, but most of these, for most part, is a pretty straight grain pattern and not a ton of knots. This one's a really clear board that's got incredibly straight grain patterns. So that's just an example of what you'll get in this particular Western red cedar. You can see here, they're really straight, that those butt up to each other really well, and you don't have weird gapping and that sort of thing. So that's why we tend to gravitate toward this particular product with the Western red cedar. It's a great quality board, and they have a good quality control on these and makes for a really good fence. Another big consideration for your wood fence and knowing that it's built and constructed correctly are the fasteners and hardware that you use. So there's a few different options there. The first being one that is somewhat common that you would need to watch out for is staples. So that would be using it's a pretty thin fence staple. They can be longer, but using that to attach the pickets to the 2x4 with a staple. But those are used because they're quick and they're cheap, but man, they don't hold up well. You're gonna start having boards and pickets popping and pulling out pretty quickly. So I would never consider using staples for your fence pickets. So the other would be a nail, and nails again are different. Not any nail is applicable. You do want to make sure that you use a nail that is either galvanized or stainless, especially for a treated lumber, because if you use just a common nail, it's going to deteriorate in that wood with that treatment. So this right here, both of these, this is a 3-inch nail. It's used for the framing to attach the 2x4 to the post, and then this is a 2-inch nail that is for attaching the pickets to the 2x4s. But what's unique about these is, so this is a hot dip galvanized, which is the coating that protects this nail. It also helps it hold up in the treated lumber to where it's not going to deteriorate or rust. You can see sometimes you'll have streaks coming down a fence, and that's because they didn't use a galvanized nail, and that nail is slowly rusting and sending streaks of black and rust marks down the wood. So anyway, so galvanized is important, or stainless can be used. The other thing is you want this is called a ring shank, so it may be tough to see, but there's little raised or beveled edges along the shank of this nail. And what that does is once it's shot in, so these are shot in with a nail gun, and once that's shot in, that raised edge acts as kind of like a barb or a catch that solidifies that hold, whether that's between the 2x4 and the post, or the picket and the 2x4. So that gives a better hold to help keep things from moving and backing out. So that's our common standard, is a ring shank galvanized nail. So that's most that we do is with that. There are other options to upgrade that you can use. The most common upgrade would be an upgrade to a screw, which gives you the superior hold. It does come, now screw is a little bit more costly than the nail. It also takes longer, so your labor for install is going to be a little bit more for the screw. But the screw is nice because it gives a superior hold. Once you screw that thing in, it's a lot less likely to pull or pop out. And also for any repairs and that sort of thing, the screws are easy to work with because you can back them out, pull boards off, replace, do what you need to. So that's kind of what you need to know for fasteners and what to look out for and deciding what you want to use on your fence. All right, so now that we're done going through the cedar pickets, the next component is going to be our framework and our post. So let's head outside and check out the options that we have there. All right, so out here we're going to check out our framework for our fence, which would be our post and our rails, like our 2x4s. Right here we've got a stack of some of our 2x4s with all of our dimensional lumber, being posts, 2x4s, that sort of thing. We use a number 1 grade, so you can see on this tag here is a number 1 prime. So that just means that it is, these boards are kept to a higher standard than compared to a number 2. So a number 2 grade is what's most commonly found really anywhere. So if you go to any kind of store or lumber yard, more than likely most of it is a number 2, which is not bad. Structurally, number 2 does okay, but in a number 2 you're going to find more knots, more bark edges. They'll include more that have bark edges. These don't have any. So it's just going to be a little laxer standard. The number 1 is going to have less knots. They're going to cull the boards that have bark edges, so you can see they've got all good, nice, clean edges. A tighter, straighter, more consistent grain pattern. You can see you will have some knots, but less knots than a number 2. So that just gives a more consistent board, a higher quality board, and ultimately a more longer lasting board. And as we talked with the pickets, there's no guarantee of something not warping, but with those aspects of straighter grains and less knots, it's just less likely to. So it gives you more opportunity to have a straighter, longer lasting fence with the number 1. So that's our 2x4s. Same thing with your post. The 4x4s that we use are a number 1 as well, and that's a 4x4 post. That's the most common post you'll see, like on a 6-foot fence. Now if you're talking about a 8-foot fence or taller fence, we would automatically upgrade that to a 5x5 or 6x6 to give you more structure for that taller fence. But with the post, we're gonna have the same number 1 grade lumber, and it's something to consider with your fence project. Now, diving into the post options, most common is this is a treated pine post. Honestly, even when you do cedar pickets, We really like the treated pine post because, one, this is treated for ground contact, meaning it's treated with enough treatment to be buried in the ground and guard against that moisture and everything that you're going to have in the ground. So that works out really well for the post itself. Now, the other most common upgrade for a post or the other options would be going to a metal post. And so there's a couple options I'm going to show you on metal posts that you can consider as well. The steel is a great option. It is a little bit more of an upfront investment, but you get the strength of the steel, and then also no chance of warping on these posts. So if you want your posts set straight and to stay straight, the steel is definitely the way to go. And it's rock solid, it's super strong. But there's two main varieties of steel option for a wood fence. One being a round post like you see here. And what you would do there is set this post as normal, and then there are a couple different varieties of brackets, but here's an example of a bracket that you would set this at whatever height you want your rails, and then your 2x4 goes and attaches with screws to it, and then you attach your pickets to your 2x4s when you frame like you normally would. I guess the limitation or the disadvantage of that is once you have your fence in place and you imagine your pickets here, whichever side of your fence is your non-picket side, you're going to be able to see this galvanized post. So that's something to take into consideration. The other option is a metal post like this, and there's some different brands. The most popular brand is called a Postmaster. So a lot of times this is referred to as a Postmaster post. And the unique thing about this is it provides the same strength, stability, non-warpage, straightness as this does, but it's designed to where your 2x4 rail would fit to butt up to this post. Then you would screw it in from the back side here, but then on the back and the front, once you have your pickets on, it actually conceals that metal. So if you went with a Postmaster type steel post, once you have your pickets on and you cover the back of that post, it all looks like wood, so you don't have a metal galvanized post sticking out or contrasting from the normal wood fence. Yet it gives you all the benefits of a steel post. So we do both. We're actually in the middle of a big job doing something like this, but most common is to use the Postmaster whenever we do an upgrade to a steel post. All right, so in conclusion, all that, I know that there's different scenarios and be applicable solutions for different needs, depending on the timeline you're going to be in your house or the budget that you have. Some of those things will come into play, but regardless of that, just hopefully that helps to consider things like what grade of lumber you're using, what type of pickets you're using, fasteners and types of posts, and that help you in your decision-making process. So if you have any questions or need any help with that, we'd be happy to help or answer any of those questions that you may have. All right, so thanks for joining us for this deep dive into wood fencing. Hopefully you learned something and that's helpful. Make sure and like this video, that helps us out a ton, and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this.